the first part. So, okay, so we're talking today, we're starting to actually fill out taxes. So if you guys were filling out your own taxes and you were doing it all by hand, you weren't having somebody help you, you weren't having a computer do it, this is how you would fill your taxes out. So please keep phones put away. I don't want you on your phones at all to get distracted, okay? So we're talking about itemized versus standard deduction. So when you file your taxes, everybody gets some type of a deduction. There are two main types, either itemized or standard. We're going to talk about the difference between those two things as we go through this. So first, let's talk. The first question on your paper is, what is a tax deduction? So you're going to write this down under number 1 on your paper. So it's an expense that you have during the year that can be subtracted from your gross or your overall income before your taxes are figured. So write this down on your paper. This is question number 1. I'll give you a second to write it and then I'll explain it better after you write it. All right, so the word deduction means subtracted out, or we're taking money out. So let's talk about that again. So you'd have the amount of money you made, which is called your gross income, the total amount of money before anything was subtracted. Then you have what's called a tax deduction, which reduces that. We subtract the tax deduction, and whatever's left, that's what you're going to pay tax on. The bigger your deduction is, the less tax you have to pay. So you want a big deduction in order to pay less taxes, because the deduction makes your income less, and the lower your income is, the lower your taxes are going to be. So we have our income, we subtract a deduction, whatever's left over, that's what we're paying our tax on. So let me just give you an example in money. Let's say that we have, we made $50,000, okay? So if this is our gross income, that's how much we made in the entire year. And then we have whatever our tax deduction is. Let's say our tax deduction is $20,000. So we would subtract those and I would get 30,000. This is what we're paying tax on. This is what's called our taxable income. So if after I take my deduction out, whatever's left is what I'm paying tax on. 30,000 is less than the 50,000. I would rather pay tax on 30,000 than on 50,000. So you basically got 20,000 tax free. You didn't have to pay taxes on that 20,000. This is federal tax, not any other kind, just federal. This just has to do with federal. Your Social Security, your Medicare, those are different. But your federal tax, you get to have a tax deduction before you pay your taxes. So that $30, that's going to be our focus when we file our taxes, because we're only paying tax on our taxable income. Do you have questions about that? Okay, so that's a tax deduction. That's what we're talking about today, is what is a tax deduction? What are our options? So number 2 says, let's see. What are the 2 ways to calculate your tax deduction? So write these 2 ways down. First is an itemized deduction. Second option is a standard deduction. You will choose one or the other. And we're going to talk about how do we choose which one we're going to use. So write these 2 down. So write down itemized deduction or standard deduction. This is number 2. So write this on your paper. So we're going to choose either itemized or standard. Those are the two types. So we're going to talk about what's the difference and how do we know which one to choose. So on your when you fill out your taxes, you're going to decide, do you want to do itemized deductions? Sometimes they just call it your itemizing, or are you taking the standard deduction? We're going to talk about the difference between the two. So number 3 says, well, how do you determine if you should itemize or take standard? Generally, and for this class, whichever deduction is larger. Very rarely would you choose the smaller one. So the larger deduction is the one you want. You want a big deduction to pay less tax. The bigger your deduction is, the smaller your tax is. So big deduction, less tax. So this is number 3. So write this down. So whichever deduction is larger, write this down on number 3. And maybe put the word larger in capital letters or underline it so it stands out. Whichever is larger. So we do some figuring. We figure out what the itemized number is, what the standard number is, and you compare them. And if itemized is bigger, we're going to choose itemized. If standard is bigger, we're going to choose standard. So you have to compare your itemized number for your taxes to the standard number for your taxes. Whichever one is bigger out of the two, that's the one we're going to choose. And that's what we're doing today, is finding those two numbers and figuring out which one's better. All right, so number 4. This says, we're talking about itemized deductions. So the itemized deductions is where you take actual money that you spent throughout the year and you look at this list of things. Did you spend money in these certain categories? If you spent money in these categories, we would put them into the form we're going to fill out, and that will tell you what your itemized deduction number would be. So these are the things that go in the itemized deductions category. So, I just want you to write down these bullets, these categories. You don't have to write the whole paragraph at the top. So these are the things that go under itemized deductions. If you spent money in these categories, then you might want to itemize your deductions. So you're just writing these things down. I want you to write all of them. So make sure you write every one of those down. There's a good chance on a quiz, it might ask this question to list a couple of these. So you'll want to make sure you can read them in your notes and that they're written in there really good and clear so that when you get to that, if there's a question on your quiz about this, you've got it written down exactly what you need. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. So itemized deductions. If you in your life, if you have a lot of medical or dental expenses, you have to have quite a bit to make it worth it. You'll see the form actually just helps you do it. But if you have medical dental expenses, if you have state or local income taxes, If you have real estate taxes, so this could be, well, if you own real estate, so maybe you own different property. If you have property taxes, that's like if you own your own home, you pay property tax. So as soon as you own your own home, a lot of times you're going to want to itemize your deductions depending on how much property tax you're paying. Mortgage interest. So again, if you own your own home, you're paying interest on your home, that counts. Gifts to charity. Gifts to charity could be money or things. So if you donate stuff to like Goodwill or DI, those could be a tax write-off. So if you ever donate stuff to a charity or a place, or even just giving money to any charity, that counts as gifts to charity, either things or money that you give to a charity or to like your church. That counts too. If you donate money to your church, that all counts under this gifts to charity. So anytime you have any kind of donation, whether it's cash or things, you want to keep track of that throughout the year, because if you have enough, then it could account for, could help you have a better deduction. And the last one, loss from a federally declared disaster. So maybe you were in some hurricane, some tornado, some kind of a crazy disaster that happened, then you would be notified if that was the case. And they would say you get this much of a deduction if you lived in this certain area and you had a property there or something like that. They would tell you if you got that part. Hopefully you don't have to worry about that ever, because it would probably be better to not have the tax write-off and keep your home than to have to be involved in that. So that's kind of a messy one. So itemized deductions. These are the things we're looking at, but you have to fill out the itemized deduction form, and it will ask you all of these questions along the way. The last part is, what is a standard deduction? So for 2023, it changes every year. So every year, the last 5 years, well, longer than that, but it's been going up every year, the standard deduction. So for 2023, so I want you to write that this is the 2023 standard deduction. It's $13,850 for single taxpayers. So I want you to make sure you write single on there. And it is $27,700 for married taxpayers filing with their spouse or filing joint. Remember that if they're filing with their spouse, we use the word joint or jointly. You will need these numbers. Please make sure they're very clear on your paper. If you write them down wrong or you can't read your writing, you're going to mess up every paper we do for the rest of this tax stuff. So write those down very clearly. When you're done, I want you to look at your paper, make sure you can read the numbers, double check that you wrote them down correctly too, because if you wrote them down wrong, it will mess up all your stuff. So you have 13,850 and you can read it. Yes. 27,700 and you can read it really good. Okay. There's no question what it says on your papers, right? You all wrote perfectly. Okay. So these numbers are what you use for standard. If you choose the standard deduction, it never changes. It will be the same. Every year it changes, but for 2023, anyone that chose the standard deduction, this is what it would be. All of you filling out your taxes this year, there is a very small chance that you would not choose standard. Unless you had like ridiculous medical expenses, you're going to be choosing a standard deduction for yourself. So if you were filling out your taxes this year, you're going to be choosing the standard deduction. So you would probably have had this 13,850 because you are most likely single and you are using the standard deduction. So that would be, if you were doing your taxes, that's probably what it would be, because you don't have a lot of the other expenses right now. And so it wouldn't be worth doing itemized because the itemized would be lower. If the itemized is bigger than that, then we would choose itemized. We want the bigger number. So the only way we would use itemized is if we got more than $13,850 in expenses that we would have on there. All right, so now we're going to actually do some examples of a couple different people to see how do we decide if we itemize or use the standard deduction. So on the second page, you have this. You all see this? It says William Shakespeare at the top and has some information, right? So we're on the second page of your paper now. I want you to look at the second and third page in your notes. George, I'm on the wrong example. Thank you. So George is your first one, right? Thank you. So George, all of you have George up, George and Martha Washington. So it looks like this at the top, and you have a second page that has at the top, it says Schedule A deductions. So these two papers is what I want in front of you. I want you to have them side by side so you can see them both. So take them out of your binder if they're in there, because you want to see them both at the same time. So you have this paper in front of you, and then you also have, and I'll put it up here so you can see, you have this paper that says Itemized Deductions, Schedule A at the top. You want those two pages in front of you. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at George and Martha Washington's information. You see right here, it says possible deductions, and we have a list of deductions and how much they cost. We're going to use those numbers to help us fill out the itemized deduction tax form to know if we're going to itemize or do a standard. These three questions we're filling out after we fill out the form. So we fill the form out, then we can answer those three questions. The form is going to be based on that list of possible deductions. And also we're going to have to get a couple things out of this W-2. Remember, we talked about W-2s recently. So we're going to have to get a couple numbers off the W-2. And then the rest of the stuff is going to be in the in that list of possible deductions. Okay. So let's go to our form. So this is what we've got in front of us, the itemized deduction form, right? Everybody sees that. So we're just going to go through on this form. You're going to read every single line and just do what it says. Okay. So very top, it says the name shown on form 1040 SR. We are going to fill out a 1040 next time, but this is just the name of the person. So we're going to put both people's name. It says name or name. So we're going to put George and Martha Washington on this line. All right. If you are not using a pencil, I want you to use a pencil. So if you don't have a pencil, please grab one. I do not want you doing these forms in pen because you notice the lines are really tiny. If you get it wrong and you have to erase it, if you have pen, you've like messed it all up and you'd rather, it just makes it real messy. So make sure all of you have a pencil, right? So make sure you're using pencil. If you mess it up, I want you to erase it really good and rewrite it. Don't cross stuff out like we have on some stuff when you have extra room. Rewrite it, erase and rewrite it so you have it good. All right, so one question at a time. So we're going to just start line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4. They've got them all numbered to the side. So the first part is your medical and dental expenses. So that's the first thing that we have listed in our stuff also. So it says, I'm reading just one line at a time, medical and dental expenses. We're going to write down any medical and dental expenses. So if you go back to this form, you see it says medical expenses right there. Do you see that? If it is not listed, you are going to put 0. So if they didn't have medical expenses listed on that list, you would put 0, but this does have them. So we're going to write 2,500 on that. So in line 1 or on line 1, I'm going to write 2,500. Please make sure it is very clear and you can read it perfectly, okay? All right, so there's line 1. So now we're going to look at line 2. Line 2 says enter amount from form 1040, which we haven't filled out yet. So I'm going to just tell you what you're going to put in this line. So you're going to look and you're going to write yourself a note on this. So when you are doing your other assignments, you'll remember. This is from box 1 on the W-2. So you're getting that from box 1 on your W-2. So we're going to go to the W-2. If there are 2 W-2s, which there are, we're going to add them together. So I want you to, on your paper, it would probably be good to even circle this. So box 1 on your W-2, this one, and I want you to circle it because there's only going to be like a couple places we're going to use on our paper. on the W-2. So I want you to circle box 1 on both of them. Add those together. That's the number you're going to put in box 2 or on line 2 on your form. So add those two numbers together. I want you to circle them on your paper though, so it's easy for you to look back and say, what did I use there? Okay, so I'm going to write down what I got. You guys tell me, make sure that I have the right number. So double check my numbers, because if we get any numbers wrong, it's going to mess us up. So I got 72,263.82. We good with that number? 72,263.82. Did anybody else get 0.51 also? Will you type it in one more time just to check? Because if we get this wrong, it's going to mess it up. Everybody else, who else got 8.82? Nobody? Did you guys do this? I want all of you to type it in your calculators. Did you guys all type it in? Did you get that, Naya? Okay. Karen, did you get it? Okay. Dax, did you? Did you type it in your calculator? Yes? Okay, please make sure you're typing this in. All right, so there's that line. So let's go to the next line. So line 3. Line 3 says multiply line 2 by 7.5%, which is really 0.075. So you're going to take line 2. So I'm going to do that line 2, and in your calculator, times it by 0.075. So grab your calculators, everybody type it in. Take line 2, that number you just got, times it by 0.075. You're just following each direction, the line on, or the directions on each line. Okay, Taryn, what'd you get? Awesome. Write very clearly so you can see it. Take your time, write these numbers really good so you can read them. If you can't read these numbers, you will get the wrong answer in the end, and you're going to use these numbers throughout. Make sure you can read your writing, and make sure we can read your writing. Okay, line 4 is next. So line 4 says subtract line 3 from line 1. But keep reading. It says if line 3 is more than line 1, enter 0. So first thing we're going to check is this. Is line 3 more than 1? Is 3 more than 1? Yes. So we're going to enter what? 0. If 3 is bigger, we're going to enter 0. If 3 is not bigger, then what you're going to do is you're going to subtract line 3 from line 1. So I want you to write off to the side in this. You can like write yourself a little note that says line 1 minus line 3. If you do that in this one, if you did 1 minus 3, the 2,500 minus 5419, you're going to get a negative number. If you ever get a negative, either you did something wrong or you're just supposed to enter 0. You will never have negative numbers on these forms, ever. On any tax form, there will never be negative numbers. If they go into the negatives, we usually just write 0, or you're doing something wrong. In this case, it would have given you a negative, which means you just put 0. But you just have to make sure you read both parts of that line. Subtract, but if 3 is bigger, enter 0. Okay, so both parts of those are important. All right, so now we're going to go to 5. So number 5 says state and local taxes. That's what this section is going to be, is state and local taxes. So we're going to look at 5A. So we're reading 5A right here, and we're going to put it in this line right there where it says 5A. So 5A says state and local income taxes or general sales tax. You may include either income tax or general sales tax on line A, but not both. If you elect to include general sales tax instead of income tax, check this box. We're going to mostly just focus on the first line, state and local income taxes or general sales tax. So look at your paper and see if you see any state or local income taxes. So first of all, does it say state or local income taxes in the list? No. So we're going to look on our W-2 now. On the W-2, Do you see, does it say state income tax or local income tax on your W-2? It says state. So down here, we see state income tax. You also see local income tax right here, but there's nothing in that box. I want you to circle these boxes down below so they stand out. So state income tax on both forms, I want you to circle them. These are the only boxes, these 3 boxes that I have circled are the only 3 you're going to use off your W-2 for this form. Those are the only 3 we care about. So we have the box 1, which we already used. Then you have box 17 and 19. If there were numbers in 17 and 19, you would add all of these together. 17 and 19 from the first one plus 17 and 19 from the second. In this case, we just have the 17. So we're going to add those 2 numbers together and get an answer. And we're going to write that on our form on box A or 5A. I also want you to write not right now, because I don't want you to miss this. On this line right here, box 5A, next to it, I want you to write box, what was it? Box 17 and 19, right? Box 17 and 19 from the W-2. So put that off to the side so you remember. So if I add those together, so Gabriella, what'd you get when you added those? All right, so that's A. So now we're going to go to B. So B says state and local real estate taxes. Does it say in our list on the paper, state and local real estate taxes? Yes. So you're just looking at this top part up here. See how it says local real estate taxes right there? That's what we're going to write down. If it's not on that list, enter 0. If you don't have it listed there, put 0. So we're going to do 1,200 in that box. So 5B is 1,200. And you have to write small, but you have to be able to read it also. The next one, state and local personal property tax. Does it have personal property tax listed? Does it say personal property tax anywhere in that list that is listed at the top of your paper? So what are we going to write? 0. If it's not listed, that means he didn't have any. So you put 0. Okay, line D. So I'm reading each line as I go to find my answer. Add lines 5A through 5C. So you're adding A, B, and C together. So get your calculators, add those numbers together. Natalie, what'd you get when you added them? 2,248. Awesome. And again, it's really small, so please write very legibly. Take your time, write a tiny bit slower if you need to so you can read it. Okay, now we're going to go to line E. So we're looking at just this first part that I have circled. It says, enter the smaller. So we're looking at 2 numbers. Which one is smaller? Is 5D smaller or is the number 10,000 smaller? So 5D, the one number we just wrote, is it smaller or is 10,000 smaller? The 5D is smaller. So we're going to write the number from 5D. So we're just going to copy that number down. If it was bigger than 10,000, then we would have written 10,000. So you're entering the smaller number. The next one says other taxes. Does it say exactly those words, other taxes, on the list on your information sheet? So we're going to write what? 0. So it doesn't say that. Then it says number 7, add lines 5E and 6 together. So adding 5E and 6. So these 2 we're going to add. So we just have 2248.66 again, because there was a 0 there. Make sure you can read it. Make sure you know where your decimal is. Make sure it's very legible. Okay, we good with that section? Okay, we're going to go to the next section. You're just reading every single line as we go through this. All right, next one says, this section is home mortgage interest and points. If you didn't use all your home mortgage loan to buy, build, or improve your home, see instructions. We're not going to worry too much about that. We're just doing the very basic stuff. So A says home mortgage interest and points reported on your form 1098. We would have another form. We're not going to get into that form, but it's just going to be listed. Does he have home mortgage interest listed on his information sheet? Yes. So how much is that? Perfect. We're going to write that number down. So $1,782 on 8A. So home mortgage interest and points. It doesn't say points anywhere, so we just ignore that. We just worry about the home mortgage interest. The next one says home mortgage interest not reported to you on Form 1098. We're not going to have anything like that that's not reported that's weird. That one's always going to be 0 because we're not going to have something that's not reported. So you could even, if you want to put a star by this or even say always 0 next to it, you can. That will always be 0 on everything we do. 5C, points not reported on the Form 1098. So again, we aren't going to have anything that's not reported, so we're going to have 0 in that one. So those two every single time are going to be 0. So if you want to write yourself a note to remind you of that, you could. So E or D says reserved for future use. It's grayed out. We're just ignoring that line. They just left it in there just in case they want to add something another year. So this right here is where we're at. E, add 8A through 8C. So A, B, C, we're going to add those together. So 1782, 0, 0. So we have 1782. The next one says investment interest. Do we have investment interest listed on our sheet? On that list, does it say investment interest anywhere? So we're going to put 0. So if it's not on our sheet, we're going to enter 0. Line 10 says add 8E and 9 together. So we're going to add E and 9. So just 1782. Adding those up, we're just adding a 0. So we have 1782. Okay, we're getting close. Last two sections. So the next one is gifts to charity. So the number 11, it says gifts by cash or check. Make sure you pay attention. Look at number 12, just so you can see the difference, other than by cash or check. So 11 is actual cash that you're giving to somebody, or a check, which is actual money. 12 is if you're donating things or items, like you donated clothes or you donated shoes. The first one is cash. The second one is items. So looking at our paper, we have both cash and gifts to Goodwill, which would be things. So we've got both of those on this guy's information. So the cash is going to go on line 11. So the 1200 is going on line 11. And then 12 is other than by cash, which is the 2370. He donated that much stuff to Goodwill. So the first one is actual cash. The second one is items that we found the value of them and put that into money. The next one, carryover from a prior year. We don't have anything listed on our paper about carryover, so it's going to be 0. And then the next one, add 11 through 13 together. So we're adding 11, 12, and 13. So take those numbers, add them together. So you will need your calculator for this one. So Dax, tell me what you get when you add those. Did you guys get something different? I think you mixed up some numbers. Do it one more time. What? So grab your calculator. Read what you said. Read what's in your calculator. There you go. You just said it backwards. So you have the right answer. You just mix your 7 and 5 up. So you have it right. So 3570. So number 15 says casualty and theft losses from a federally declared disaster. In the list of information on your paper underneath possible deductions, does it have loss from federally declared disaster? No. So what are we going to write? 0. Do we have any other things listed on the deductions? No. So we're going to write 0. All right. The last line, line 17 says, add the amounts in the far right column, lines 4 through 16. So you're going to look at the right numbers only and add those all together. So we are adding together line 4, 7, 10, 14, 15, 16. Those numbers down the far right side, add them all up. If you add them wrong, it's messing up everything you do from here on out. So please be extra careful putting them in your calculator. So add those all together. All right, Kieran, what'd you get? Awesome. Well, all of you verify that that's correct. Because if it's wrong, we're going to get messed up. We good? Okay, that number, and I want you to write this on your paper. This is your itemized deduction amount. That's the whole purpose of that form, is to figure out how much would your itemized deductions be? What is your itemized deduction number? That's the whole purpose of this form. It is called at the top, it says itemized deduction. So this form tells you what your itemized deductions would be if you chose to itemize your deductions. Remember, we have two choices, itemized and standard. This is itemized. So write that on your paper so you remember that's what that number represents. Now we can answer the 3 questions on the front and we're done with this one example. So go back to your information sheet. So this sheet right here, at the very top, we have 3 questions. What is their itemized deduction, standard deduction, and which one should they take? So first, their itemized deduction is the answer we just found. So on that top one, we're going to write 7,600.66. So that's their itemized deduction. Their standard deduction, it is the same for everybody. If you look at your notes that we just wrote, so the notes at the very bottom, you have this, the standard deduction. They are married, so this would be the standard deduction for them. If they're married or single, these numbers will be the same every time for standard. So 27,700 is what we're going to write for this. So 27,700. That is their standard deduction. The next question says, should the Washingtons itemize or take the standard? So which of those two would we use, itemized or standards? Why? It's more expensive. It's bigger. You want the bigger number. So we're going to say standard. And maybe in your notes, I want you to write next to this just for your notes, because it is bigger. So you remember why you chose it. If you look back at your notes, you'll know, why did you choose that one? Why did you choose them? Okay, we're going to do one more of these. We're going to go through it a little bit faster now that you've seen it. Okay, so we're now going to do, so you can put those 2 papers away. The next 2, you've got William Shakespeare, a single person, 1 W-2. We're going to fill out the form. Let's finish this first. So we're going to fill out his form. Again, these are the possible deductions. If it's not listed in there, or I want you to circle these things. Remember, circle box 1, circle box 17, and circle box 19. Those are the places you're looking. If it is not in one of those places that I have circled, you will put 0. So if you have in one of those, as you're reading, if it's not listed in one of those places I have circled, you're going to write 0. So circle all that stuff on your form or on the information sheet, including the 3 boxes, so you remember exactly where we're looking. So let's go to their form. So top of the paper has his name, so please don't forget to write their name, because we're going to have lots of examples. We want to know which one goes with which. So this is William Shakespeare. All right, so line 1, medical and dental expenses. Do they have medical and dental expenses? Yes, 6,500, right? So write 6,500 in there. Line 2, enter amount from 1040. This is the one that's tricky one. You have to just remember, use box 1. So again, it might be good for you to just write box 1 next to that. They only have 1 W-2, so you just write the number. So box 1 is 74,000. You have to write kind of small on this. 823.12. So there's your box 1. The next line says to multiply by 0.075. So take the number you just wrote down, multiply by 0.075. Okay, so I get 5611.73. Check my answer. Is that what you got? Be careful with rounding, that you round correctly to the nearest penny. The next one says subtract line 3 from line 1, but if 3 is bigger, is 3 bigger in this one? It's not. So we're going to do, make sure when you do this, you do line 1 minus line 3. Do it in that order in your calculator. 1 goes first, 3 goes second. 1 minus 3. So we should get 888.27. Make sure you can read all of your numbers. Okay, 5A. So state and local income taxes or general sales tax. Does he have, that's where we're looking at the W-2. Is there state taxes or local taxes, income taxes on the W-2? Yes, which box was that again? Box 17. So box 17 on our W-2. So we've got 1014.23. And again, it might be good to write box 17 so you remember where we got that from. B, state and local real estate taxes. So looking at the list at the top, possible deductions, does he have any state or local real estate tax? Yes, so we're going to write that down. So $1,000 there. What about state and local personal property taxes? Anything that says personal property tax or state or local personal property? Is there any of those? So we put what? 0 because there's none. So 5D, add 5A through 5C. So we're adding those together. So add A, B, and C. I get 1,014.23. E, this is one that a lot of people get mixed up on. So make sure you understand what's asking. We're just looking at that first part. Enter the smaller number between 5D or 10,000. Is the line 5D smaller or is the number 10,000 smaller? That's what you're entering, whichever one is smaller. So 5D is smaller, so I'm going to enter that. Number 6 says other taxes. So there's nothing that says other taxes on our paper. So we're just going to enter 0 and then adding 5E and 6 together. Yes.
Sorry, I just have a question.
Good.
You put 1,014.23. Wouldn't it be 2,014?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for fixing that. So 2,000 because I had to add, right? Good. And if you mess that up, it's going to mess everything up. So thank you for fixing that because that would have messed us clear up at the end. Okay, we good now? Okay, so 2,000 because I had to add those and I wrote the wrong number. Awesome, thank you. So line number 7, add 5E and 6 together. So we're adding 5E and 6, so we're adding 0. So that one stays 2014.23. Okay, are we good? Do I have anything else I need to fix or is that looking right so far? Good. Okay, let's go to the next section. So number 8, home mortgage interest and points. So 8A says home mortgage interest and points reported on Form 1098. Again, we don't have the 1098, but on our paper, it will tell us if we have home mortgage interest. So does it have home mortgage interest under his possible deductions? Yes, so we're going to write that down. So we have 2578.12. So 2578.12. And that's just off of the information sheet. These next ones where it says home mortgage interest not reported. So if it ever says that, we're going to just write 0 because we don't have anything that's not reported. And points not reported, if we see that, we're going to put 0. E says to add 8A through C. So A, B, and C, we're adding those together. So we're just adding 0 on this one. So 2578.12. 9 says investment interest. Do we have any investment interest? We put 0 because there's nothing that says investment interest. 10, add 80 and 9 together. So we're going to add those two numbers. So 2578.12. So this is a tedious process, but you just one line at a time reading through it. So the first one in the charity, remember the first one is cash. The second one is gifts, like things that you're donating, actual things, not money. So they have gifts by cash. So 2,700 is going to go in line 11. And they have gifts to Goodwill, which is where they donated things or items. So 5,690 to Goodwill. They donated a ton of stuff this year. And 13 says carryover. We don't have anything that says carryover. So that's 0. And then we're going to add those 3 together. So adding 11, 12, and 13 together. Check my number, 8390. Yes? Okay. Do they have any casualty or theft losses from federally declared disasters? Nothing written on there, so we're going to put 0. The next one, other stuff. We don't have any other things. 17, add those all up. So go ahead and add down that right column. Add the amounts in the far right column together. Okay, check my number, 13,870.62. Again, I want you to write yourself a note. This is the itemized deduction number. That is the entire purpose of this form, is to get that one single number. All that work to just get that. That is our itemized deduction number. So now let's go back and answer the questions at the bottom underneath your W-2. So if we go back to our notes paper that has the information, it says, what is William Shakespeare's itemized deductions, which is the number we just found. So 13,870.62. His standard deduction, he's single, so it's going to be the, what number was that? 13. Thank you. 13,850. So which one does he want? Itemized or standard? He wants to itemize. Why again? It is bigger. So we want to write itemized. And again, because it is bigger. You want the biggest deduction to pay less taxes. The bigger the deduction is, the less tax you're going to pay.